81% of the nation's Native American dropouts, 73% of the African American dropouts, 66% of Latino dropouts, and 34% of white dropouts. To be clear, this isn't just about schools. The challenges facing low income and children of color are not confined to the classroom. Black children face similar challenges in almost every sector. When it comes to labor, nearly 220,000 African Americans ages 16 to 19 are presently unemployed, and the unemployment rate for African American men is twice that of the rate for white men. When considering health care, it's important to note that 13% of African American children are uninsured, and nearly 5,000 African Americans under the age of 13 are living with AIDS and HIV. Today, nearly 1 in 3 black males born can expect to spend some time in prison. And at mid-year in 2006, nearly 100,000 black men were in federal or state prison or local jail. All of this really matters because we spend an exorbitant amount of money trying to recover these students. What we don't pay for in educating them properly, we end up paying for in additional health care, things like welfare reform, access to Social Security. We spend a lot of money on incarcerating these youth. If we combine all of these figures with a lot of what we're doing now, we could save a lot of money. I want to skip so we can go to our panelists and recognize Congressman Danny Davis, who just walked in, trying to stretch a little bit to give him some time. On that note, Congressman Danny Davis is completing his 6th term as representative for the 7th District of Illinois. First elected in 1996, Congressman Davis continues to be a tireless advocate for the African American community generally and for black males more specifically. During the 110th Congress, Congressman Davis successfully passed the Second Chance Act, which is designed to rehabilitate and to prepare ex-offenders for a healthy and positive reentry into society. Congressman Davis currently serves on the Education and Labor and Oversight and Government Reform Committees. Dr. Leslie Fenwick is a professor of education policy and dean of the School of Education at Howard University. Leslie has held appointments as a visiting scholar in education and visiting fellow at Harvard University. A former urban school teacher, administrator, and legislative aide, Leslie is the author of numerous research articles, text, and policy monographs on urban school reform. Her article, Looking for Leaders in a Time of Change, appeared in the recently released book, The Last Word, The Best Commentary and Controversy in American Education. Dr. Sean Harper is a professor of higher education at the University of Pennsylvania. He was a principal investigator for the National Black Male College Achievement Study, the largest ever empirical research study of black male undergraduates. His 6th book, titled Exceeding Expectations, Black Male Achievers and Insights into College Success, is being published by the Harvard University Press. Dr. John Jackson is president and CEO of the Schott Foundation for Public Education, an organization committed to ensuring a high-quality public education for all students, regardless of race or gender. Dr. Jackson joined the Schott Foundation after 7 productive years in leadership positions at the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, where he served as the NAACP's Chief Policy Officer, and prior to that as the NAACP's National Director of Education. Dr. Ivory Tolson is an assistant professor of counseling psychology at Howard University and senior research analyst for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. He is the author of Breaking Barriers, Plotting the Path to Academic Success for School-Age African-American Males, which analyzes academic success indicators from national surveys that together give voice to nearly 5,800 pupils from schools across the country. Dr. Tolson is a lecturer and active academic, credited with numerous publications and research presentations in over 20 U.S. states, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Scotland, and South Africa. These are your panelists. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tolson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, thank you all so much for coming out to this presentation. I think that this is a very important session, and I'm honored to be with my colleagues over here. A little bit about David Johns. A year ago today, I talked to David Johns at the Academic Advisory Council meeting. This was right before ALC, and at that point, the report that you have in your hand, Breaking Barriers, was just an abstract. It was about a 4-sentence abstract, and I gave that to David Johns that day, and I didn't have a lot of time to talk to him, But I gave him that abstract, and I said, I'm working on this. I want your help. And he emailed me, and I was real busy during that time. He probably emailed me about 4 times before I replied, saying, when are you going to start working on that report? So I owe a lot of my success in getting that report together to David Johns. I'm going to spend a little time going through the findings of my report without giving a whole lot of commentary on. I'm going to leave a lot of time for our guests to make comments about the report and about their own work that either complements the report or gives a different angle. But the report, Breaking Barriers, Plotting the Path to Academic Success, was conceived from a desire of finding solutions, or a desire to find solutions for some of the problems that we know are represented in the black community, specifically as it relates to African American male achievement. What I wanted to do was, there were a few philosophies that I had when undertaking this endeavor. One, I felt like there were too many broad brush racial comparisons in the way that we tried to study this problem. I felt like the way of doing research where we just compare black people to white people and Hispanic people was giving us only one part of the problem and the solution. So I wanted to create a research design where we looked at low achieving, middle achieving, and high achieving black male students. I felt like if we compare the low achieving black male students to the high achieving black male students, we would have a better picture of where they need to go. I felt like low achieving black male students, a more realistic aspiration for them is high achieving black male students, because a lot of times they're in the same social environment. And so their trajectory to success is probably going to be a lot more similar. I also wanted to steer clear of the deficit models in research where we just look for problems and not acknowledge the success and the solutions. A lot of black males and students in general that come from circumstances where they have these barriers to overcome, they develop some adaptive patterns that actually make them stronger in different other arenas. And so if you're able to come from an impoverished area and you're able to manage an area that has violence and drugs and still become successful in school, graduate, and get a good job, you've picked up certain skills that's going to benefit you even more than someone who grew up in an environment where everything was handed to them. So I wanted to look at all these different things. As I was constructing the report, I had the benefit of working with a writing project. I was a judge of a writing project for African American males. These were males aged 11 to 17. It was called A Mile in My Shoes. And so these black males, they wrote their stories, they wrote their lives, and I was a judge that determined who got the monetary prize. All of them got some incentive for participating in the project. But as I read these essays, a lot of what I was reading coincided with a lot of the research that I was doing. And so if you look at the report, if you see the brown text boxes on them, these are the words of some 8th through 12th graders who participated in that project. And I'm going to read one of their quotes to you, which is on the screen up here. This is an 8th grader who said, "If it wasn't for school, who knows where I'd be today? I have been living in poverty for almost 10 years, and my community looks horrible. It looks like it has been ransacked. There are some good things about my community, though, like some of the people. Most of the teenage guys, maybe 50%, are high school dropouts. Not me, though. I have high expectations of going to college." One profound thing about this is that 50% figure is exactly what the research is showing. So his observations coincides with the numbers that the research gets. Another profound thing about this kid, if you read the rest of his essay, he talked about the main reason he wanted to go to college was to get a good job, return back to his community, and make sure everyone had an air conditioner and heaters, and to build a new playground in his community. Now, this is something that a lot of us take for granted. A lot of us don't want to do our work in our offices if we don't have air conditioner or heaters. but yet he has to get up, go to school, come back and do his homework in a condition that most of us just wouldn't tolerate, that most of us might take for granted. And so that just speaks to the resilience of some of these kids and the needs that are out there. You'll see in the report, and I won't go too much in detail with the method, but there were 4 national surveys that I used. I looked at hundreds of different national surveys, and I selected ones that had a high number of school-aged African-American males and a concrete academic achievement factor. These factors could be high school GPA, our GPA in general, a school engagement index, but there was some concrete measure that gave their academic achievement. It's constructed in 4 parts. Personal and emotional factors is the first part of it. And I'm going to read one more quote before I talk about the numbers, because this quote really hit home with one of the findings of the report. This kid, the 8th grader, said, "I think sometimes we don't get enough sleep and can't stay up during class, which affects how much information you get from the teacher. From that, you don't take good notes, then you study bad notes and have the wrong information. Now you take tests and get a bad grade. That gives people further reason to believe that you are dumb and don't know anything." So this was an 8th grader who said that. Now, I was struck by the end of it because this kid was sensitive that people are looking for reasons to call him dumb. Now, the other thing that struck me was one of the statistical findings. One of the first analyses that I did was I took a large number of emotional variables, and these were anything that dealt with the mental health of someone. This was their attention, their self-esteem, their happiness, use of psychotropic medications, anything that had to deal with mental health. I used something called a stepwise multiple regression analysis in order to pull out the ones that had the most significant relationship with academic achievement. Now, the one that came out to be the strongest was a variable called quality of life. And that variable was measured with the question, how do you feel about your life at present? And the response choices range from, I'm not happy at all, to I feel very happy. And so the black males who answered in the affirmative to that question and said, I feel very happy about my life, was significantly more likely to also report good grades in school. And I always share that statistic with a parent education class that I do every other week at the courts. And when I ask them, what variable do you think came up the highest, everybody always says self-esteem. Well, self-esteem doesn't really tell us a whole lot. It's hard to really understand self-esteem. And sometimes African-American males can present with something that looks like a high self-esteem, but it doesn't necessarily translate to good grades, our overall happiness, our happiness with their life. And so what I tell the parents is that helping your children to feel good about the overall quality of their life, helping them feel happy, that actually has the highest relationship. Now, that indicator made a lot of sense to me. The second one didn't when I first did the analysis, which was tired in the morning. So the second highest emotional indicator, mental health indicator of academic achievement was feeling tired in the morning. Those who said that they felt very tired in the mornings when they go to school had a significantly higher chance of not doing well in school. And at first when I was writing, I was almost passive about that finding and almost doubting the integrity of the data. Then one of my friends called me, who's a professor at University of Memphis, and he said that he and someone else was doing a study on fatigue and academic performance among African-American males. So I asked him to tell me more about that, and he said, a lot of these kids, they grow up in environments that's either poorly structured or have certain things going on in their communities that's keeping them up very late at night. Now think about how normal people react to not getting enough sleep. He asked, when you go to conferences and you spend all night in the lobby of the hotel talking to people you hadn't seen before, and you don't get enough sleep that night, and you get up at 7 o'clock that next morning to go to a session, how do you behave? Do you pay attention? And so I had to agree with them, sometimes it's very difficult. So actually, sleep deprivation can present as ADHD. You gotta squirm around. You might put your head down. You may look like you're paying attention, but not really pay attention. Or you might need a psychoactive stimulant called coffee in order to stimulate your central nervous system, just so you can pay attention long enough. Now, another interesting thing about happiness and quality of life is when I broke that down by gender, happiness, and this was from a separate data set that asks the question, are you a happy person? Happiness among African American males, or academic achievement was almost dependent upon happiness among African American males, but not so much females. So females were able to not be happy and still do well in school far better than any African American male could. And you can see this interaction effect on this graph right here. This is people who are not positively engaged in school. These are people who are positively engaged in school. So you see with African American males, there's a spike up, a drastic difference. With black females, it's an incline. Okay, future plans was another variable that I looked at. A data set asks the question, what do you think you will be doing when you finish high school? These were the students that said college, and this is their academic achievement. So the higher this dot is, the higher their academic achievement. This red line is the average academic achievement among all people in that data set. This is community college, this is working, this is military, and this is unemployment. So as you would expect, those kids who had aspirations to go to college did much better in school. Those kids who actually had aspirations, are not necessarily aspirations, but they had the expectation of being just unemployed and nothing else after college or after high school, they had the lowest levels of academic achievement. Now, one thing that was interesting about this, the white dots are white males, the black dots are black males. With white males, that expectation after college was far more predictive. So there was a much clearer relationship there. So the white males who wanted to go to college, they had the highest level of academic achievement. The ones who expected to be unemployed, they had the lowest level of academic achievement. With black males, those who expected to be unemployed had a significantly better academic achievement than the white males who had the same expectation. The ones that expected to go to work had a significantly better academic performance. So that indicates that there may be some dissonance among African American males. There are probably a lot of black males in these categories right here that actually have the ability to go to college, but they don't have a clear path. And this is why we need college access programs. We looked at nutrition. We looked at the surveys asked the kids about different types of foods they might eat. They asked them if they ate them frequently or seldomly. The foods what I did was a factor analysis to cluster the foods together, or see if there was a cluster pattern to the foods. And when I did the factor analysis on it, the foods clustered in a logical order. The foods like potato chips, cakes, pastries, hamburgers, hot dogs, sweets, and sodas, Coca-Cola, they all are, I didn't mean to call out Coca-Cola, but soda. they all clustered under one category, which I could logically call junk food. And the second group included cooked vegetables, raw vegetables, fruits, whole wheat bread, and rye bread. So these were the foods that clustered in a different category. So that means if a young black male or any other racial group said they frequently ate raw vegetables, then they were likely to also say that they frequently ate fruit. Vice versa, hot dogs, hamburgers. Now, when I looked to see if there was a relationship between the types of food that you eat and academic performance, there was a relationship there among all races. And the white dots are white kids, the red dots are Hispanic kids, and the black dots are black kids. Now, these lines right here, the black line, the red line, the white line, this is the average amount of this type of food that they said that they ate. And this is their academic performance, poor to very good. So you see junk food, and this is the white kids. We see the white kids who said that they ate a lot of junk food. This is the average amount of junk food that these white kids are eating. So these white kids right here, they're eating far more junk food than the average right here, and they also have the lowest levels of academic achievement. The ones that are doing very good in school, they eat less junk food than everybody else. Now, these are the black kids. This is the average of black kids right here. These are the high-achieving black kids, and they eat less junk food than the average amount of junk food that black kids eat. But look at them compared to all of the white students. Look at them even compared to the white students that are low-achieving. These black kids are reporting eating a whole lot of junk food. When you look at healthy foods, it's the opposite relationship. So we see that everything flips. This is the average amount of healthy foods that black kids are reporting eating. This is the average amount of healthy foods that white kids are reporting eating. And this is poor academic achievement and very good academic achievement. We see the more healthy foods they are eating, the better their academic achievement is. Now, there may be some relationships going on. This may relate to having more structure in the house or different things like that. But it's something that we really need to think about. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through some of these others so I can get to some family factors. These are in the report that you all have, but bullying and positive student relationships, we see more experiences with bullying, the poorer the academic experience is, and the less experiences, the better. Some of these kind of have a what I call, and no offense to anybody, I'm a nerd myself, but I call it the nerd bin right there, because we actually have the good kids that have the highest levels of positive student relationships, and then very good, they kind of dip just a little bit, but they're still a lot better than the average. Smoking cigarettes and using marijuana, these were the psychoactive substances that had the highest correlation with reverse correlations with academic achievement. Okay, I'm going to read quickly one of the quotes related to family factors. Entering my teenage years, I saw my dad a lot, just about every week, and it was good. I was very happy and very relieved that he cared enough about me that he would spend time with me and get to know me again. I was very excited and very relaxed. Then things started to get difficult between us. It was difficult like I had done something, but really, it was just another adjustment he was making and learning his responsibilities regarding me. I thought that was very articulate and insightful of this 11th grader. One thing that we really have to look at in our community, in the black community, is we are the only racial ethnic group whose kids have a higher probability of growing up in a single-parent home or in an absent father home than with the father. And so we need to think about that. These are the stats on that. As far as relationship with parent, black kids who reported that it was easy to talk to their fathers and easier to talk to their mothers had also reported higher achievement in school. Also, other parent factors, parents who told their kids that they were proud of them, let them know when they were doing a good job, helped them with their homework. All of these things correlated highly with academic achievement. Certain things that had a non-significant relationship, this doesn't mean that it helped, but it didn't come up in the findings. Limiting the time that they watched TV and different restrictive measures really didn't have a high correlation with academic achievement. It was really more those positive indicators, the parents that told their children that they were proud of them, that came up. As far as social and environmental factors, black kids being in jails and detention centers is something that is causing a lot of problems with academic performance. There's a lot of disruption there. I'm sure other people on the panel could speak to it. Other factors that was important, school-based activities came up to be the highest correlated positive factor, or a factor that correlated with academic achievement. So all of this stripping down the school-based programs, that's only going to make the problems worse as far as academic achievement. School factors, I won't go through these line by line, but there's a section in the last section in the report talks about the overall feelings of school and feeling that schoolwork is meaningful. All of these have a positive impact on academic achievement. It's their perceptions of school. Relationships with teachers came out to be a very, very important factor. And across 3 of the databases that I looked at, these teachers, the black males who reported that their teachers were interested in them, invested in them, and treated them with respect and treated them as a person, those were the ones that reported higher levels of academic achievement. I think this quote right here, and I'm going to read this because it's so important. It kind of captured all the data that I looked at as far as school factors. This kid said, "As a student at Timberland High School, I am exposed to countless opportunities, inspiring people, and the importance of having an education. Throughout my high school career, I have been part of the Future Business Leaders of America, won 3 awards for public speaking. It was a school where I met teachers who were concerned about my education. One of those teachers was my AP U.S. History teacher, Melissa Solé. I'll put her on the map. Besides making history an exciting class, Ms. Solé expressed the realities of minorities living in the United States, especially black men. She made me realize that struggle can be a luxury when you achieve, because it makes you the person who you are." And so this is the kind of teacher that has a positive impact. Okay, my time is up, but I'm gonna talk about this one last stat right here, which deals with school safety, which is a big concern, and it's talked about quite a bit. If you look at some of these school safety indicators, like carrying a weapon and feeling safe at school, among black males who felt unsafe at school had much lower levels of academic achievement. Those who carry weapons for self-defense also had much lower levels of academic achievement. When we look at the students who said that they carry weapons for self-defense at school, black males carry more weapons than white males. Hispanic males carry more students than both black males and white males. But as far as feeling safe is concerned, black males were the least likely to report feeling safe at school. Now, as far as school safety measures, black students are almost 500% more likely to pass through a metal detector to enter school than a white student. And so we're structuring, and the same is true with security guards. So when you put these findings together, we have much more security guards and metal detectors at schools with black students. Black students still aren't feeling more safe. In fact, they're feeling much less safe than other students. So we have to ask ourselves, are schools being structured like prisons or like schools? So that's my time. I'm going to turn it back over to our esteemed moderator in the panel. Thank you all.
We have the lights, please. If you guys are anything like my students, some of you are a little tired, but we're going to change that real quick. As we get through our panelists, they're each going to speak in the order in which they're seated. Really quickly, 2 points about the Beyond the Test Score study. It's important that that's the title for our conversation, because often when we're talking about black boys, we're talking about them in 2 sort of separate silos. We're either talking about sort of these softer skills, some of the things that Ivor's report touched upon, them having access to school-based activities, them having positive and affirming relationships with adults, primarily their parents. Them being able to have nutritious diets. Those things often are left out of the conversation when we're talking about the ways in which they're underachieving. And so I think that it's important for us to think through a lot of those findings as we listen to our panelists. The second thing that I want to say is just really important is that often we're talking about black boys, and rarely are we talking to them. I think this study is important. I know it's important because it gives voice to nearly 600 African American males from across this country. Hopefully it won't be the first study of its kind. It'll lay the groundwork for more to come, but those two things are important to keep in mind as we listen to our panelists. We're going to leave space whenever we're joined again by the congressman. We'll allow him to speak. So now we'll hear from Dr. Leslie Fenwick.
Thanks, David. The hallmark of science is replication, and replication is about what works. And yet too much of the research and commentary on African American males is an oppressive litany of pathology, in my opinion. It spotlights what isn't working. We need more research like that conducted by Tolson to lead productive engagement in the worlds of policy, practice, and philanthropy. In Breaking Barriers, Tolson advocates for educational policy that supports opportunity to learn variables, specifically the centerpiece of which is access to a quality teacher. Tolson informs us that African American males who are positively engaged in school are more likely to report being happy. That sounds commonsensical, but it's helpful to have statistical analysis to support that statement. Well, who is the critical linchpin in student engagement? It's the classroom teacher. And the research literature that exists is clear about the relationship between teacher quality, diversity, and student success. Even still, too many African American and poor students languish in schools that have high concentrations of non-certified teachers and a revolving door of novice principals. African American and poor students are 70% more likely than their white and more affluent peers, 70% more likely to have a teacher who is not certified in math, social studies, English, and science, teaching them those 4 subjects. Further complicating this matter is the tremendous demographic mismatch between the public school student population and the nation's teaching force. Nearly 20% of the nation's public school students are African American, and yet only about 6 to 8% of the nation's teachers are African American. In urban schools, inside central cities, 73% of teachers are white. In urban schools outside of central cities, 91% of teachers are white. We know from the research literature that tremendous benefits accrue to African American students when they have African American teachers. African American students who attend schools with high concentrations of African American teachers are less likely to be expelled or suspended, more likely to be recommended for gifted education, less likely to be placed in special education, and more likely to graduate high school in 4 years. Additionally, in her study about teacher perceptions of African American male students, Maddox found that African American teachers are more likely than their white peers to describe African American male students as intellectually gifted and to report that these students engaged in positive behaviors such as homework completion, attending school regularly, and assuming leadership roles in classroom activities. These outcomes, I believe, point to the primacy of the teacher-student relationship as explained by Tolson and affirmed in his assertion that teachers do more than just teach content. They stand as models for what it's like to be an educated person. They also serve as surrogate parents and mentors to young people. And if students are to believe that they may too one day become an educated person who makes a positive contribution to society, then they need to see diverse examples in front of them. Perhaps the singular best thing that policymakers can do to respond to Tolson's charge and the data that he's collected and analyzed is to expand the minority teacher pipeline and fund efforts to increase the number of African American males who become teachers. I'll close there because I know we have a time limit, but when you come back to me, David, I'd like to talk about Howard University School of Education's Ready to Teach program, a $2.1 million grant program that recruits African American male teachers in 5 urban districts throughout the country. And I'd also like to talk about Dr. Tolson's last finding related to African American male students and their feelings of safety and what our policy and practice response can be to that.
I have a question for you that's going to address exactly that. Next we'll hear from Congressman Danny Davis.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to commend Dr. Tolson as well as all of the researchers that are on the panel. As a matter of fact, when I heard all of the pedigree, I couldn't help but be reminded of my daddy. I mean, I grew up in rural Arkansas, and my daddy was a sharecropper. But I remember one year he decided to take his mule and put him in the Kentucky Derby. And when we got to Louisville, the man kind of looked at it funny and said, "Sir, what can I do for you?" He says, "My daddy said, well, I want to put my mule in the Derby." And he says, "Sir, this is a race for thoroughbreds. And don't you know if we were to let your mule in, he couldn't possibly win?" My father said, "Well, yeah, I suspect he'd have a hard time, but I want him to know what it feels like to be in such good company." So I feel like that mule being here with this group, I mean, it really makes me feel good. Let me just say a couple of things in addition to the findings. I believe that you bring about change when you promote concepts, create opportunities, and reduce barriers. And so I'm convinced that part of the reason that African American males are not achieving academically on even par with other population groups is there is missing the idea that it makes a difference. There is missing the notion that it's going to change the quality of their lives. There is missing the notion that somehow or another, if I do this, then it's going to make a difference. I think of the existence of all the individuals that I grew up with who absolutely had virtually nothing in the way of resources. Some of us even went to one-room schools where one teacher taught 8 grades, like I did, plus the little primer and the big primer, all at the same time. But our parents promoted concepts all the time. You do this, life is going to be better for you. You do this, you're not going to have to pick cotton. You do this, you're not going to have to chop cotton. You do this, you're not going to have to plow mules. We grew up believing that, absolutely believing it. And individuals excelled in many ways because they saw education as their way into another way of life, another environment. Some of the same kids who don't achieve academically, they do extremely well putting up dope routes. They create ways to sell dope and to escape the police for a long time before they get caught. Or they go in the penitentiary and they know all about the system. They become legal scholars. They can tell you all of the rights and all of the possibilities that exist because they have focused on that. And so some of the findings I'm so pleased to suggest that the Education Committee that I serve on, and there are 4 African American members of Congress on that committee, Bobby Scott from Virginia, Yvette Clark from New York, Dawn Payne from New Jersey, and myself. We've had the best year for higher education that we've actually had since the Pell Grant was created. I mean, this past session, we did some yeoman stuff, and we got some stuff built into laws that say, let's put a focus on creating ways to come up with more African American male teachers. I am convinced that one of the reasons that many black boys drop out of school by the time they're 5th or 6th grade is because they have never seen a black male teaching them. They've never seen a black male with a book. They've never seen a black male reading. And so they've decided that education is really a woman, female, girl kind of thing. So they don't put as much emphasis into it as they do looking at what goes on the football field. I just had a friend of mine, Bob Love, the other day, who used to score 40 points a game. Bob couldn't read. Bob was a superstar. And after he got out of the NBA and decided to try to find a job and all that kind of stuff, he couldn't read. He had a speech impediment, but he also couldn't read, hardly couldn't write. And people used to wonder why Bob always shied away from reporters after he had scored 40 points. Reporters would come up to try to reach him, and Bob would go into the dressing room because he wasn't comfortable. He couldn't talk. So if we can reinforce the idea that it makes a difference, I think we will begin to see different levels of achievement and accomplishment.
I like the way that this conversation is building. We've heard a couple of points that are very relevant to the conversation broadly, but definitely to the work that's being done by the Schott Foundation. And those really quickly are strengthening student and teacher relationships and increasing the number of black male mentors, those working in the field of education and just acting as examples for positive achievement. And then the second piece is promoting concepts, so making education and learning relevant. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, David. I didn't grow up in Arkansas. My daddy didn't have an old mule. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, but my daddy told me when you find good people, try to stay close to them. So it didn't take me long growing up in Chicago to recognize that when you get close to Congressman Danny Davis, you want to stay close to him. So I'm glad to have another opportunity to be close with him today. I appreciate the work of Dr. Tolson. It's important that we highlight these issues impacting black males. I think it has been said before. Dr. Fenwick outlined it. There's clear research that says that we are 99.6% the same. Regardless of your race or ethnicity, there are more genes to explain the variance in our eye color than our racial or ethnic differences. So if we're 99.6% the same, to the degree that we see any variance in educational performance, it's not because of the race or ethnic differences, but the social policies and social practices which lead to those differences. Dr. Tolson's research gives us an opportunity to look at these policies and practices. A couple of points of clarification and just looking at it. I would also encourage us to look at, when we begin to look at the performance of high achievers and low achievers, to control for socioeconomic status so that socioeconomic status does not become a proxy for high achievement or low achievement. And there's a way to do that in your regression analysis. The second, I would just say that we also have some limitations as it relates to using, or we have to be careful about using the performance of black high achievers as the ceiling. There's clear research, Ronald Ferguson's research, that indicate in running the 2004 NAEP data, usually you look at the educational attainment level of the parents to project the educational attainment level of the child. So if a parent went to college, you would predict that the child's educational attainment level would be higher. In the 2004 NAEP data for 8th graders, the parents of black children whose parents went to college performed lower in math than the parents of white children whose parents, the children of white parents whose parents dropped out of high school. So you would expect black children would outperform that group. So if we use the aspirations of the achievement level of black children as the ceiling, we have to be careful that we're not using the basement as the ceiling. And our children can perform beyond even what we're seeing with the high achievement levels today, because it's very much possible. When you look at the panel, you see 3 young African-American males with doctorates, which is a positive. We talked about the impact of having an African-American male who is the candidate for president. But I don't want us to use the shadow, have a shadow keep us from looking at the reality. The reality today is 50 years after Brown versus the Board of Education, 47% of African-American males are graduating from high school. 50 years. The reality, which is indicated in this report, Giving Half a Chance, is that in a city like New York, which has the largest enrollment of black male students in a public school system, 32% of black males are graduating. In Chicago, the second largest, 37% are graduating. In Indianapolis, 19% of black males are graduating from high school. So while there are some gains and things that, from a perspective of role modeling, could be positive, Substantively, we still have a long, long way to go. And Dr. Fenwick began to talk about the elements. Now, what's the solution? We know that black males can perform and they can achieve at the highest level. One of the things I'll point out, if you have a copy of this report, I ask you to turn to page 6 and 7. Page 6 and 7. What you see on page 7, quickly, is a list of the 10 best performing states for black males. If you notice anything, you will find that black males, the 10 best performing states are places where there are small numbers of black males, where black males cannot be relegated or isolated to the schools that are under-resourced. They have to be educated with their peers, with the highly qualified teachers, with the access to early childhood education. And when they're in those settings, regardless what color the teacher is, and I do believe that there's some benefit for having black teachers in the classroom, but when they're in those settings, they perform at level or even above their peers, above their white peers. And if you could go down that list, you will find that New Jersey is an outlier. But one of the things that's happening in New Jersey, again, policy and practice, is the fact that the Abbott decision has been going on for a number of years, and the Abbott decision was focused on equalizing the resources. Alternatively, if you look on the left side, and this will be my last point before we move on, you will find that the places where black males are not performing well are urban centers where they are relegated and isolated to under-resourced schools. Alternatively also, if you look at Indianapolis and Detroit, where there's a small white male population relegated to those same schools, the graduation rate for black males in Indianapolis, 19%, for white males, 19%. Graduation rate for black males in Detroit, 20%, white males, 17%. So the issue of performance is not a race issue. The question that we must answer, and I hope we get to some of these solutions during this discussion, is why are more black kids relegated and isolated to under-resourced schools? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I saw Dr. Harper's head shaking and pen moving, so I know he's excited to talk. So we'll hear last from Dr. Harper.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, David. Congressman Davis, the best I can do is to say I was in Arkansas last week, and I didn't see any mules or any thoroughbreds, but I am certainly delighted to be a part of this panel as well. I would especially like to thank Dr. Tolson for his outstanding work. I really enjoyed that report and want to quickly comment on various pieces of it so that we can open up an opportunity for you to ask us questions. I was particularly moved by the very first quote, the student quote that he read. I couldn't pronounce the guy's first name, but it was Mr. Chambers, an 8th grader, who talked about wanting to go to college. The question for me as a scholar who studies higher education, which hasn't been, at least up to this point, a major part of this discussion, but a compelling question for me is, well, how were his college-going aspirations developed? And I would love to see this 8th grader find his way into a college or university, perhaps even my own, and try to figure out, well, what is it that enabled him to persist despite all that was going on around him into higher education. I'm not sure that we have enough data to illuminate the pathway into college. I am similarly interested in taking some of the bad data, right? And I don't mean bad in terms of his analyses were bad, but bad in terms of these were troublesome, problematic findings. I am interested in those kids who went to those schools with the metal detectors. I think you reported that over 90% or so, were in those kinds of schools. I would love to know, for those who were in those kinds of schools who somehow managed to transcend those kinds of educational settings and again find their way into a college or university, how that happened. And what is it that we can determine from those students' experiences that will enable us to replicate, as Dean Fenwick talked about in her remarks, to replicate the kinds of things that even in the most under-resourced, underperforming, lowest performing schools, those students still, despite their socioeconomic disadvantage, manage to transcend those odds. So those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping will come as additional next steps from your work, and again, I applaud you for it. I also found interesting your discussion and treatment of teacher factors. Although higher education is my area, I remain extremely interested in the ways in which teachers teach black kids and all kids, right? Again, I was happy to hear Dean Fenwick talk about the need for some sort of reform and some sort of standards for teacher education and getting more black teachers. But I'm also interested in the white ones. Because the reality is, at least at the present time, most black kids are taught by white teachers. So as we're thinking about policy and reform for teacher education, I would love for us to have more aggressive mandates for preparing white teachers for sufficient and excellent performance around multicultural education. This semester, I'm teaching a course on critical race theory at the University of Pennsylvania, and in my class yesterday, we were talking about, the white students who were in the class were saying, wow, we never talk about this kind of racism in our teacher education courses. So, I would love to sort of build into curriculum for teacher education programs some sort of recognition for how teachers are complicit in the cyclical reproduction of racism that continues to yield negative outcomes for black students.
I'm inclined to ask you to say that last statement one more time, but I think somebody might ask a question about it. Really quickly, we have about 45 minutes for a conversation now that we have some context to all of this. The two things I want to remind you that we're talking about are ways to ensure equity in educational opportunities and then to provide high-quality learning opportunities for African-American males specifically. Along those lines, I have a couple questions, one for each of our panelists. I'm going to ask them, and while they respond, I want you guys to be thinking about the things that you want to talk to them about. Congressman Davis, let's start with you. A lot of your work in this last session has been focused on ameliorating the challenges facing black male youth. And given that currently our country faces some extreme challenges, among them the members of the House and the Senate are contemplating presently a $700 billion bailout of the financial industry. We've got a very costly war where we're spending something around $5,000 a second. An infrastructure hard hit by hurricanes, flooding, and other natural disasters, and an economic crisis of epic proportions. Given all of that, how do we continue to invest in policy and in practice designed to improve the achievement of African American males? What are the critical agenda items for improving these opportunities with the bare bones budget? So what are those things that we absolutely must have and cannot compromise on?
Well, let me just say that I believe that the struggle in our world has always been between those who have and those who have not. That has always been the basic struggle. I also don't believe that government was really designed to do good for everybody. I just don't believe that's why government exists. I believe that government exists because there has always been conflict in society, and that government emerged for the purpose of trying to manage that conflict. Everybody that I know that is political always try to influence the management of conflict to the advantage of what they're interested in. Meaning that you can't get around the notion of being political. I mean, you just can't get around it. I used to think that public decisions were made on the basis of what was right and what was wrong, because I grew up in a Christian household. And my mother used to tell us to do right because it's right to do right. And I thought that folks who were in places were going to do right. I just thought that was it. Then I went to school like other people and thought that you made decisions on the basis of goals and objectives and technical proficiency and all of that. The more I learned, the more I began to realize that that's not the basis on which they do it either. I finally turned to politics and discovered that public decisions are most often made on the basis of what is acceptable to whoever it is that have the power and the will to decide. Doesn't have to be right, does not have to be wrong. When we talk about public education, though, the federal government does not play as much of a role generally in public education as state governments. I mean, if you are financing public education in a state on the basis of real estate taxes, and you've got some school districts like exist in the state of Illinois, where you might be spending $18,000 a year per pupil, then you've got other districts where you're spending $6,000. Now, how can you expect to get the same product out of $6,000 a year that you get out of $18,000 a year? And so I think we've got to figure out a way to equalize or make more equitable funding for public education before we ever get to higher ed. And I agree with you, but if you don't get the base taken care of, I mean, it's going to be difficult at the levels of higher ed, except as you teach people and hope that what they learn they will impart to others. So I think equalizing funding really is the biggest challenge of public education.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Fenwick, we're going to go back to the topic of teachers. When speaking about ways to raise achievement, we often hear about the importance of educators, and you also alluded to that in your opening remarks. That is, an effective educator does more to raise student achievement than many other discrete reform efforts. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu posits that upon entering school in primary grades, black children possess enthusiasm and eager interest. However, by 5th grade, the liveliness and interest are gone, replaced by passivity and apathy. One explanation he offers for this phenomenon is the absence of black male teachers or positive black male role models in earlier grades. Can you speak more to the role that teachers play in providing high-quality learning opportunities for black males, the significance of black male educators in the lives of black male students, and then talk broadly about why aren't more African-American males being pushed to become educators?
That's a lot of questions. I'm going to anchor my response in something that Dr. Tolson said in his monograph, that there is a clear relationship between the African-American male students' academic success and a father's presence in the home, a father's educational attainment, and the ease that the student, that young male, has in talking to his father. And so I think that those 3 findings that Dr. Tolson had provide compelling evidence that African American male students would benefit from the presence of African American male teachers. Less than 2% of this country's teachers are African American males. And I think when you combine the lack of presence of those men in the classroom, as Representative Davis has mentioned, you combine that with the onslaught of negative images in the media about African American males, there's a very deleterious effect. There is a very deleterious, palpable effect. Some years ago, I conducted a study of a high school in transformation. The high school is in Atlanta, Georgia. The name of the high school is Southside Comprehensive High School. The principal who turned that school around, an African American male, his name is Dr. William Sheppard. He was not a Joe Clark kind of figure. He was very paternalistic, very much a father figure, very much a warm figure. And one of his strategies in turning the school around, which suffered from all the blights that we commonly hear, was to recruit a very diverse male staff to work with him in the school, not in the traditional roles of coach and disciplinarian, but as teacher, as director of technology, as assistant principal for academic affairs, those positions. And I want to read to you the statement of a student. I interviewed teachers, students, anyone who was in the school about the transformation that occurred in the school. This young man was asked the question, describe your school. And this is what he said. When I watch TV, I see black men fighting, selling drugs, and going to jail. When I came to Southside, I saw Dr. Sheppard, the African-American male principal, and all these other black men, assistant principals, director of technology, teachers, and counselors working together. And I thought to myself, if they are working together here, maybe there are more black men like them working together in other places too. That was a revelation for that young man. It's a sad statement that that would be a revelation for that young man, but I think it really points to the deleterious impact of not having these men in classrooms and also having children daily being victim to negative media images about themselves. So again, I point to what I think is the singular best response that policymakers can move toward, which is expanding the minority teacher pipeline and focusing efforts on recruiting African American males. Howard University School of Education has a Ready to Teach program, a $2.1 million recently funded grant from the U.S. Department of Education. The grant has the School of Education partnering with 5 districts across the country, large urban districts, Chicago, D.C., Prince George's County, Houston. I always forget the 5th. But we've recruited men from those locales who have bachelor's degrees and are interested in transitioning into the profession of teaching. They come to Howard University. They participate in a summer institute that's designed to share with them kind of a multidisciplinary knowledge base that my colleague to my right speaks to about how to be an effective teacher in an urban setting. Some of that knowledge base is coming from social work. Some of it's coming from certainly political science and sociology. But it's a knowledge base that's designed to equip the teacher with a structure for working effectively with urban students. It's very steeped in critical race theory, as a matter of fact. And those men are now teachers of record in local schools in those urban districts as they're completing their master's degree in teaching. So again, we've got to do something to expand this pipeline of minority and minority male teachers.
Perfect. Thank you for that.